Hi, welcome back to our video. Today we're going to be talking about chapter 8, which is the segmenting, targeting, and positioning process in a global scale. So this is really exciting. Now we are talking about all of the marketing concepts that are very similar to what you've learned already. They should be familiar, hopefully, from your principles of marketing. But we're going to have a global, lens through which we look at all of these concepts and processes. So I'm sure you're very familiar with the STP process, and so today we're going to be working on that. And so, what I like to do today is go over the process itself of segmenting, targeting, and positioning in a global way. And so, I like to go over first segmenting and just tell you what it means. And I'm sure you've heard of this before. And it's basically the breaking down of population into different segments, right? So segmenting, you really break down different groups of people based on similarities, things that they need, similar things that they need, um, similar incomes and lifestyles and things like that. So you group different segments based on those significant needs, and hopefully you'll find those segments that are substantial in numbers and that have similar needs, as well as there's something that you can measure easily. You can see how many people there are. You can reach them through that certain communication as well, and you can advertise to them in a way that suits that particular segment. And of course, they are able and willing to purchase your product and service. So it's the basics of segmenting, whether you're in a domestic or an international setting. But when you go into an international setting and a global setting, it becomes a little bit more complicated because segments really do vary a lot more from country to country. Okay, so if you look at Buick, which is a brand from GMC, the company which has different brands, if you look at the way it is positioned and segmented, the types of segments that it has here in the US versus the one that it has in China, it's very different. And so take a look at that, read it. So really what we're doing with the segmentation in a global scale is that before we get to the smaller details of segmenting in a domestic way, we're going to look at the whole different countries as clusters. So we're going to do what is called macro segmenting, and that means that we're going to break down different sections in different countries. Like if we would take a look at a block, we would break those countries in different segments based on their population, based on their income levels, their education, the language, economics, politics, etc. All those things that we covered in the first part of the semester, we take a look at that in a global scale, and so we take a look at those big clusters. Once we've decided that there's a specific set of clusters, like the European Union is a cluster, we have certain clusters in Latin America or the US, Canada, and Mexico, things like that. Once we look at those clusters, then we can decide which ones to go after, right? And more specifically, we can drill down on those specific countries and look into demographics and do what is called microsegmentation, which is a regular segmentation. You look at demographics, you look at lifestyle, psychographics, ethnicity. You go a little bit deeper into those, benefits, peer groups, and things like that. So again, remember, we go from macro segmentation, which is clustering several countries in different segments. We drill down to each of those countries through micro segmentation, and then After we do that, then we go to the second part of the STP process, which is targeting. So, in the second process of targeting, what we do really is we look at those segments that we just broke down and we decide which ones to go after. And one of the ways that you can decide on which ones to go after, of course, is by looking at your projected revenues. That means that you're going to look at the population, at the market share. You're going to look at how much you can charge for your product or service. Get an idea of how much revenue you will get from a specific segment or segments. Once you realize what that entails and where you have a bigger opportunity, then you look, then you pick those segments and you decide which strategy you would like to enter with. Would you like to enter with a diversification strategy, which means that you go into different markets, different segments at the same time? Like Samsung and L'Oreal, bigger companies usually do a diversification strategy, which is kind of like diminishing your risk in a portfolio, right? You diversify your markets. Or you choose a strategy that's only focused on one or two market segments, and you just focus all of your resources, especially for companies that have less resources, or if it's a country that has really high growth and it's very complicated, you will probably start with one or two countries. Under Armour is a company that usually does focus strategies and focuses on one segment at a time to enter, especially for those countries such as China or India that are really fast growing. They need to focus all of their resources there. Okay, so that's the second part, that is targeting. And the third part of this process is called positioning. And as you know, positioning is all of those activities that marketers go through in order to create an image for their product or service, in the hopes that the customer will pick up that perception and will look at the attributes and the benefits of the product and see and connect in that way. So basically, a position is the image that the customer has in his or her mind about your product or service. And so before, years ago, companies would try to standardize that positioning as much as possible to save resources, right? To have lower costs. But now, given that we live in a highly global society and people have very specific needs, especially for those products and services that are very personal, it is better to highlight that position, to highlight those benefits and attributes for different segments. So positioning shifts for different countries as well. So one thing that marketers do that is really interesting and very helpful for them is they create a perceptual map or a space map. And what that means is that they look at research, they look at what customers perceive as the attributes and strengths of that product or service. They look at customer ratings and opinions, and they plot them on a map. And so as you can see on the screen, there's an example of a perceptual map, and this is Steve Jobs' perceptual map in 2007, this particular example of the iPhone, and how they tried to position the iPhone very differently from other iPhones. And so they used two dimensions for this particular perceptual map, which is ease of use and whether it was smart or a regular phone. And they asked customers how they felt about the iPhone versus a Motorola or versus other phones back in 2007. And as you can see, the iPhone was just very, very on its own niche and its own side by itself, very different, very unique. Nowadays, the perceptual map doesn't look like that because we have a lot of competition from Samsung and LG and other cell phone companies, or companies that create these types of products. So it has really shifted. But it's an example of what it used to be back in 2007. And so you can do that basically with any product. Just take a look at important attributes and plot where customers see your product and service, and maybe where there's a space for you, a niche where it hasn't been covered and there's a need, and maybe you can create those products and services to fulfill those needs. Okay, so